Hi, it's me again, Stormywriter. I'm talk to you about something that I've hinted at that is part of who I am, but I've never really done anything specific about it. So this is the first post, probably of many, hopefully, looking at the other aspect of me, not just the poet, the author, and the obsessive horror fan, but Stormywriter the witch. Paganism as the umbrella term, but Wicca more specifically to me, has been part of my life since I was 15. I'd kind of always been Wiccan, pagan. I definitely knew I wasn't of a more traditional faith-based. It was just that I never had a word for it. I suppose as 15, when I first heard the word that I was looking for, and that word was Wiccan. It had come from a film at the time called The Craft. I think the film itself sparked a whole new trend of witches and teenagers being interested in that, and I think a lot of them probably ended up falling away from the path because they watched that film, they thought, a couple of spells, I can make myself beautiful, I can make myself skinny, I can make myself popular, and of course magic does not work like that. It was none of that that appealed to me. I didn't want to say a few words and change my hair colour. I didn't want to be popular, well, at least not through magic. The scene that touched me the most in The Craft was the actual invocation of Manon, the scene on the beach. I watched that scene and I felt like I was watching my life. I felt like I'd seen it before. I hadn't done any research into any form of paganism at that point. I hadn't been exposed to it, as far as I was aware, in any way, shape or form. But the idea of calling quarters, the idea of invocation, the idea of women being amongst nature spoke to me. It spoke to me in a way that nothing has spoken to me before. I think watching the film, I understood that magic was more than wishing something to happen. I understood that it was a pathway to a balance between yourself and nature. So probably unlike many people who watched The Craft and wanted instant gratification through magic, I stayed to the path to the age that I am now, which is, well, if you can do your math, if you remember when The Craft was released, you know that it's more than half my lifetime ago. But as I said beforehand, I'd always been interested in witches. I'd had a love for Samantha from Bewitched. I grew up on Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I also own Megan Mogg, even younger than that. Even things like Charmed. There's a whole lot of witchy programs that I'd enjoyed, but never made that connection that I made when I watched The Craft. I've often done talks and there's even an article in a book called Paganism 101 by myself, where they talk about when you knew that you were Wiccan. And I've often cited that the film is the point that I knew that I was Wiccan. However, like I said, there was always something there beforehand. I was terribly bullied as a child. Seriously bullied. Both emotionally, verbally, and on the odd occasion physically. At the back of my home, there was a river. And whenever I was sad, whenever I was depressed, whenever I'd been hurt once again by life, I'd go to that river and I'd just sit there for hours and hours and hours and feel calm again. I went to that river and I felt like I'm in home. I felt its power. I felt its emotions. I felt its strength. And at the time, I think I felt that I was it was a reflection of my own emotions. But looking back now, as a Wiccan, I believe that I was tapping into something more spiritual. I just didn't understand it at the time. When I finally found the label, for want of a better word, for myself, I was 15 going on 16. I was at the height of being fucked up. I'd gone through a very traumatic event that shaped me in a way that all seriously traumatic events shape you. The bullying had escalated to a point where I hated myself so deeply that I was constantly thinking about dying. I was self-harming and I was on the verge of suicide. There had been a serious-ish attempt at this time to finally find something to give me hope was amazing. I did have later on that God moment. When I say God moment, I'm talking about how Christians talk about having a vision or a voice or something that reiterates their faith. I'd been Wiccan, like I said, touched on Druidry, pagan from the age of 15. But I'd pretty much been solitary. I studied a lot, but my practice of Wiccan was not what it was. So if you ask me, for example, what Lammas meant, I could tell you. If you asked me what it was like to experience Lammas, I could tell you, but not in as much depth as the kind of academia side of things. Stuff was so bad at home that I finally left Wales, moved to England, and met who I thought was going to be the love of my life. He turned out not to be. One of the good things that he did for me was he introduced me to other pagans, one of whom is still a very close friend of mine now. Over 10 years later. Eventually, our relationship soured, and I was back in the same living hell that I had been in back home. The only difference being that I felt that I was away from everything except my faith. The thing that had helped me at the beginning was now helping me again. My only escape was going to talks, was going to rituals, and was becoming more and more involved in the spiritual side of Wiccan, not just the academia side. During one of the meditations that I had at my altar, asking for help, actually dancing, at that point, one of the other things for saving me was belly dancing. But being dyspraxic, dyslexic, and just generally uncoordinated, I kind of wanted help to find my mojo. So I asked for some spiritual help. What I got was Blodweb. She was not there to help me dance. She was there to help me live. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with the faith or the myth, of Blodweb, she was created solely for Llew as a bride after he had been cursed by his mother to never marry a mortal woman. So Blodweb was created from 9 different plants and flowers as his bride. Problem was, though, nobody ever asked Blodweb whether she wanted to be Llew's. And ultimately, she fell in love with someone else and was punished for this. She became my symbol. I had been created for a love that was no longer there, changed, demonized, left wanting. And I'd fallen in love with someone else who was going through their own similar love story. That relationship never amounted to anything, despite a lot of toing and froing from us. Maybe we were both too scared to commit to what we felt. But Blodweb coming to me showed me that it was okay to love. It was okay to not be what somebody else wanted you to be. It was okay to find your own identity. And through several years of terrible situation, Blodweb stood by me. And then, as quickly as she came into my life, she went. But she was a validation that what I felt as a Wiccan was right. That I'll always be a little wild, a little moon child, a little water sign, a little bit too emotional for people, a little bit too sensitive, always giving the best and not always getting it back. Blodweb's punishment was to be turned into an owl. So she couldn't show her face in daylight because of what she'd done, and she was vilified by the other birds. I feel like the owl. Not necessarily afraid to show my face in daylight, but always more comfortable in the dark. Not necessarily vilified by every bird, close to those that saw beyond the wide eyes. Will I ever find another deity to replace what I had with blood with? Maybe. At the moment in time, I am happy with my own coven, doing all the rituals that we do, all the Sabbaths, and just spending time at my altar giving thanks to the generic god and goddess. And if one of them ever chose to speak to me again, then as before, I will heed their warnings, their love, and I will give back to them. So, it's kind of a little talk about paganism, what it means to me, and I hope you've enjoyed this more intimate posting, and hopefully you'll hear from me again soon.